My granddaughter was asleep in her stroller when my daughter called. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had just pulled a casserole out of the oven and set it on the counter to cool, and I was thinking about nothing in particular, whether I needed more dish soap, whether the hydrangeas out front needed water, normal things, small things. And then my phone buzzed and I saw her name, and something in my chest went very still before I even answered. Mom. Her voice was flat in a way that scared me more than crying would have. Where are you? The parking lot. Outside the office? I don't... A pause. I could hear the baby making small sounds in the background. He fired me. Stuart's father fired me. And I went home, and my key doesn't work. He changed the locks, Mom. While I was at work, he changed the locks. Mom. While I was at work, he changed the locks. I set down the oven mitt. I picked up my car keys. Don't move, I said. I'm coming. She started to say something else, but I was already walking to the garage. I should tell you something about my daughter, Nora. She is 31 years old, and she has her father's eyes and my stubbornness. And for 3 years, she worked as the office manager at Hargrove Physical Therapy, a practice with 2 locations in the greater Nashville area, a solid patient base, decent insurance contracts, and a billing department that Nora had rebuilt almost entirely from scratch the year after she joined. She was good at her job. She was very good at her job. But she was also 28 when she married Stuart, and 28-year-olds in love do not always pay close enough attention to paperwork. I arrived at the parking lot in 18 minutes. Nora was sitting on a concrete barrier near the entrance, her coat pulled tight, the stroller beside her. My granddaughter, Bay, was awake now, chewing on the strap of her hat and looking around with the calm curiosity of an 11-month-old who doesn't yet know that the world can be cruel. I took the stroller handle before I said anything. I checked the blanket around Baya's legs. Then I looked at my daughter. Her eyes were dry. That worried me more than anything. Get in the car, I said. Both of you. Mom, I need to figure out you can figure things out from my house. Come on, she didn't argue. That worried me too. On the drive home, Nora told me the whole thing in pieces. Stuart's father, a man named Conrad Hargrove, who had been running the physical therapy practice for 11 years, had called her into his office that morning and told her that her position was being eliminated. Restructuring, he said. The practice was going in a new direction. He had a severance offer ready, 2 weeks. He slid it across the desk like he was doing her a favor. She'd asked if she could have time to review it. He said she should sign it before she left the building. She didn't sign it. She'd gone to her car, called Stuart, and his phone went to voicemail. She'd driven home and found that her key no longer worked. She'd stood on her own front porch for 4 minutes ringing the bell before she understood that no one was coming to the door. Then she'd called me. I listened to all of this without saying much. There wasn't much to say yet. I was still taking inventory. When we got home, I set Bea up in the living room with her blocks and her elephant toy, and I made Nora eat something. She hadn't had lunch. And then I sat across from her at the kitchen table and I said, I need you to tell me every single thing you know about the way the practice is set up, the business structure. Who owns what? She looked at me. Why? Because I want to understand the situation. She told me what she knew, which was not as much as it should have been, because she had trusted her husband and her father-in-law and had spent 3 years being good at her job without asking too many questions about the architecture of the thing. Conrad Hargrove ran the practice. He made decisions, signed contracts, handled the big picture. Nora managed billing, staff scheduling, insurance credentialing, patient intake systems. She had rebuilt their entire electronic health records process in year 2. Did you ever see the lease agreements? I asked. For either location? She thought about it. Once, when the Brentwood location renewed. Stuart asked me to look it over. And whose name was on it? She was quiet for a moment. I don't know, she said. I didn't pay attention to that part. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. Go rest. Take Bea upstairs and rest. After she went upstairs, I sat at that kitchen table for a while by myself. Then I got up and went to my office and opened my laptop. Here's what most people did not know about me, and what Conrad Hargrove absolutely did not know about me. I spent 24 years as a commercial real estate attorney in Nashville before I retired. Not a paralegal, not a title clerk, an attorney. I had handled lease agreements, property transfers, business acquisitions, and entity structuring for clients across 3 counties. I knew exactly where to look and exactly what I was looking for. It took me about 40 minutes. The 2 Hargrove physical therapy locations, one on Charlotte Pike, one in Brentwood, were not owned by Conrad Hargrove. The practice operated out of leased spaces. The leases were held by a property LLC. I pulled the LLC registration from the Tennessee Secretary of State's business filings, which are public record, and I looked at the registered agent and the member information. I sat back in my chair. The LLC that held those leases had been formed 14 years ago. The primary member was not Conrad Hargrove. It was a woman named Sylvia Hargrove, Stuart's mother, Conrad's wife, a woman I had met exactly 4 times, twice at family dinners, once at the wedding, once at Bea's baptism, who had presented herself as a retired schoolteacher who mostly gardened and went to book club. I thought about that for a long time. Then I pulled the LLC's registered documents more carefully, and I found something else. 18 months ago, 6 months after Nora and Stuart's wedding, the LLC membership had been amended. A second member had been added, my daughter's name. I read it twice. I read it a third time. Nora was a partial member of the LLC that held the leases for both Hargrove physical therapy locations. She had not known this. I was nearly certain she had not known this, because if she had known, she would have mentioned it. Stuart had added her name to the entity, presumably for some purpose that benefited him, possibly tax-related, possibly to access financing, without explaining to her what it meant or what she had signed. I closed the laptop. I sat in the quiet for a moment. Then I opened it again and started making a list. The next morning, I called a former colleague of mine. Her name is Janet, and she has been a family law attorney in Nashville for 30 years, and she owes me 2 favors from a complicated property dispute in 2009 that I will not get into here. I told her the situation. She listened without interrupting. The LLC membership, she said when I finished. Do you know when exactly Nora signed anything that might have added her to it? Sometime around the wedding or shortly after? I'm guessing it was buried in something, a joint financial document, a refinancing disclosure, something she would have signed without reading carefully. Is she willing to authorize you to represent her interests? She will be. All right, pull the full entity history. Look at any credit accounts or financing that names the LLC as a guarantor. If they used her membership interest as collateral or ran anything through her SSN, that changes the picture considerably. I already had my laptop open. It took me 2 more days. Janet helped with the parts that required formal records requests. What we found was not a small thing. In the 18 months since Nora had been added to the LLC, someone had used the entity to apply for 2 commercial lines of credit. The applications listed Nora as a co-member. One of the credit lines was in default. The other was being serviced out of the practice's operating account, which meant that Nora's name was attached to a debt she had never agreed to and possibly never known existed. I printed everything. I put it in a folder. I did not tell Nora yet. She was sleeping better than she had in days, and Bea was getting over a small cold, and I needed everything organized before I said a word. On the 4th day, Stuart called my number. I don't know how he got it. I assume from Nora's phone. Or perhaps he had always had it. Irene, he said. He used my first name, which he had never done before. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? I said. Nora's been upset. I understand that. But the situation at the practice is a business decision, and the thing with the house, I can't explain that. I'm sure you can. I'd like to sit down with both of you, with Nora and Stuart, I said. Before you say anything else, I want you to understand something. I have been reviewing the business records for Hargrove Physical Therapy and for the Associated Property LLC. I know about the credit applications. I know about the default. I know about the amendment to the membership agreement. I let that sit for a moment. I'd like to suggest that before anyone sits down with anyone, you speak with your father. Tell him I'd like to meet with him. Friday morning, 10 o'clock. He can choose the location. I'll bring my attorney. There was a long silence on his end. Mom, I'm not your mother, I said pleasantly. I'm Nora's. Friday at 10. I hung up. Conrad Hargrove chose a conference room at his attorney's office in Green Hills. I suspected he thought that would be intimidating. A formal setting, his lawyer present, home territory. I arrived 8 minutes early with Janet beside me and the folder under my arm. Conrad was already there. He was a large man, silver-haired, accustomed to being the most significant person in a room. He did not stand when I came in. His attorney, a younger man, early 40s, good suit, offered his hand and introduced himself. I shook it. We sat down. Conrad's attorney opened by talking about the severance offer. 2 weeks of pay, a release of claims. He spoke as if this were still a negotiation about employment, as if we were here to haggle over a number. I let him finish. Then I opened the folder and I placed 3 documents on the table. The LLC registration, the membership amendment, the credit application that listed Nora as a co-member. What we're actually here to discuss, I said, is the use of my daughter's name and her membership interest in a commercial LLC to secure financing that she was not informed about and did not authorize. We're also here to discuss the existing default on one of those credit lines, which currently creates a liability attached to her name. I folded my hands on the table. I want her removed from the LLC properly and legally with documentation. I want written confirmation that her name will not be used in any future financing applications, and I want the default addressed in a way that does not affect her credit. Those are the baseline requirements before we discuss anything else. Conrad looked at the documents. His expression didn't shift much. He was a man who had learned to keep his face still, probably decades ago. But something changed around his eyes. His attorney leaned over and said something quietly to him. Additionally, Janet said, setting her own document on the table, we'll need to discuss the circumstances under which the membership amendment was executed. If your client obtained a signature under conditions that did not constitute informed consent, that becomes a different kind of conversation. The younger attorney read the document. He read it again. We'll need to take a recess, he said. We waited in a smaller room down the hall. Janet got coffee from a machine near the elevator. I didn't want coffee. I sat and looked at the window and thought about Nora at 11 years old, the way she used to organize her homework by subject every Sunday night, the little stacks of folders she made with a different color for each class. She had always liked things to be in order. She had trusted that the people around her liked that too. They came back in 35 minutes. Conrad's attorney made an opening offer that was not adequate. Janet countered. I said nothing. We went back and forth twice. By the end of the hour, we had a written agreement in principle. Nora's membership in the LLC would be formally dissolved within 30 days. Both credit accounts would be restructured to remove her name. Conrad's practice would provide a neutral employment reference. The severance offer was revised to 12 weeks. We did not shake hands. I didn't feel the need. In the elevator going down, Janet said, that went faster than I expected. They weren't prepared, I said. They expected Nora to come alone. I did not tell Nora about the LLC or the credit accounts until after the agreement was signed. That was a choice I made deliberately, and I want to be honest about it. I'm not sure it was the right one. She is my daughter, not my client, and she deserved to know sooner. But I also know her. And I knew that if she had understood the scope of what had happened before I had a handle on it, she would have panicked, and panic would not have helped anyone. When I told her, she sat very still for a long time. "He put my name on it," she said finally. "He put my name on a loan I didn't know about." "Yes." "When?" "About 10 months into your marriage." She looked at the table. She looked at her hands. Then she said, "I signed something at the refinancing for the house. It was a stack of things. He said it was standard." "I know. I should have read it." "Yes," I said, "but he also knew you trusted him. He used that." She was quiet again. Outside, Bea was in the backyard in her little sun hat, pulling at the grass, fascinated by something in the dirt. We could see her through the window. "What do I do now?" Nora asked. "Whatever you want," I said. "But I'd start with a good family law attorney." She nodded slowly. "I'm going to be okay," she said. I wasn't sure if she was asking or telling. "You are," I said. "You absolutely are." That was 14 months ago. The divorce was finalized in the spring. Nora got the house. Stuart had no real argument to make there, given the circumstances, and his attorney knew it. She went back to school in the fall, enrolled in a healthcare administration program at Vanderbilt, which she had wanted to do 2 years earlier and talked herself out of. She has 6 more months to go. Bea is walking now. Talking too, in that particular toddler way, where half the words are invented and half are perfectly clear. She calls me Nana, and she calls the dog. Nora adopted a dog in October. A big, lazy golden named Huckleberry. She calls him Huck, Huck, with great authority, as if she named him herself. Conrad Hargrove retired quietly at the end of the year. I heard from a mutual connection that the practice was sold to a larger physical therapy group out of Memphis. I don't know what Stuart is doing, and I haven't asked. I think about that Tuesday sometimes. The casserole on the counter. The oven mitt. The way everything can turn on an ordinary afternoon when the phone rings and your daughter's voice sounds wrong in a way that only you would recognize. I'm glad I answered. I'm glad I knew where to look. Some things I built over 24 years weren't just for me. I understand that now. They were also for this, for a Tuesday afternoon when my daughter needed someone who knew how to read a document and wasn't afraid to sit across a conference table and say exactly what she knew. Nora brought Bea over for Sunday dinner last week. We made pot roast, Nora's idea. Bea pushed her carrots around her tray and looked very serious about it. And at some point, she picked one up and held it out to me like she was offering me something important. I took it. I told her thank you. She seemed satisfied with that. She went back to her carrots. Some things are very simple in the end. You show up. You know your worth. You make sure the people you love know theirs. I didn't set out to become someone who could walk into a conference room and dismantle what took someone else 11 years to build. That happened slowly. Over 2.5 decades of showing up, reading the fine print, and never assuming that someone else would protect what was mine. What happened to Nora is not uncommon, and that is the part that stays with me, even now. Not Conrad, not Stuart, not the credit accounts or the forged by omission signatures. What stays with me is how easy it was for them to do it, because they counted on her not knowing. They counted on trust being a substitute for understanding, and for a while, it was. I think about the choices that led to that parking lot, not just the ones Stuart made or Conrad. I think about the smaller ones, the stack of documents Nora signed without reading because she loved someone and believed that love was enough to make the details safe. I think about how we teach our daughters to be warm and trusting and generous, and how rarely we also teach them to read a contract. Those two things are not in conflict. They never were. But somewhere we decided that one belonged to the heart and the other belonged to some colder, more suspicious version of a person. And that is a lie that costs people dearly. What Conrad did not have was integrity. He built something and he ran it through deception, using his daughter-in-law's name, her identity, her good standing. because it was convenient and because he believed there would be no consequence. That is not intelligence. That is a calculation made by a man who has never been genuinely accountable for anything. And in my experience, those calculations always have a shelf life. What I had after 24 years was knowledge. Real knowledge. The kind that comes from working through problems that don't resolve cleanly, and clients who don't tell you the whole truth, and documents that hide what they mean in the language of what they don't say. That knowledge was not glamorous. It was built in increments, in offices, in courtrooms, in conference rooms, not unlike the one in Green Hills where I sat across from Conrad and put 3 pieces of paper on the table. I am proud of it. I earned it. And Nora had something Conrad underestimated completely. She got up, after the parking lot, after the locked door, after all of it. She got up, she enrolled, she kept going. That quality, the willingness to keep going when the ground has shifted underneath you, is not something anyone can take. Stuart couldn't take it. Conrad couldn't take it. It was hers before she married, and it will be hers long after any of this is memory. Bea is going to grow up watching her mother finish something she started. She is going to grow up in a house where her grandmother's bookshelves have law school textbooks still on them, and where nobody signed anything without reading it first. I don't know exactly what she'll make of all that, but I know she won't grow up believing that love requires you to look away. That is the only inheritance I know how to leave.